got the phrase poopsicles to file away now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Faith and Beta podcast. I'm Hector Mirai, and joining me today is Chris Cooke. Chris, introduce yourself. Tell the people who you are.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Cooke. I'm the podcast host and creator of One Cross Radio, a pop culture and Christian perspective podcast. I also have a website and a YouTube channel and an Instagram account where I'll post memes, podcast episodes, and pictures of my adorable dog Luna.
Does Luna get like a cut of all the residuals?
No, she just gets so much love. Like, anytime there's a like, I'll call her over and just pet her like crazy. So she's like, oh, okay, I like this.
But we were talking just on the whole worst year thing, and like before we got started, and that's we're saying, but like that's one of the things you were mentioning is that in 2016 people said it's the worst year, and that's 2020 has been one of those years that there honestly has been a lot of good. There's been a lot of good, and compiling that list of 100 things it's not going to be the hardest job in the world. My problem is finding people that actually are interested in the same 100 things or 10 things at a time. So like, I need to find my anime people to talk. I need to find my comic book people to talk, etc. But with you, man, tell us about like what you do with One Cross Radio, because you've been around for a while. You're one of my Canadian brothers that is up there doing ministry in different ways, but your stuff is largely online, right? So so tell me about what One Cross Radio does.
So basically, what we do is wow, this is difficult to go with. I do podcast episodes, and most of the time it was I used to do interviews on my former website with other believers, just people in ministry, just because the amount of times and I heard Matt Chandler say this back at the Elephant Room. If anybody who doesn't know who that was, it was a mini conference almost a couple of years ago, hosted by several pastors, where they were like, we realize a lot of the conversations we have at conferences can be really, really interesting and really, really good. And we'll touch on stuff that never necessarily gets touched on from the pulpit. So that's what we're trying to do here. I had worked in a church for several years at that point, with an organization called Youth Unlimited, as well as just being on my former home church's staff. And there was just a lot of conversations I was having with friends and pastor friends of mine, and people involved in various ministries. I'm like, there's so much good stuff. And even back in 2012, when I started doing these, like around that time, there was some talk of this might be one of the worst years. And there was the doomsday predictions. And then we also got that terrible 2012 movie that came out. And I started doing interviews with people, just being like, what is your experiences in ministry? Just share some of the stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get shared or isn't known to other believers or non-believers. Like, what's the impact of what some of the pastors do? What's the process? Or if you're a missionary with YWAM, what's that process like? And then we also started doing, Hector, you know me, I'm a huge nerd. I'm a giant pop culture fan. There are others who are much nerdier than me.
I'm still not on the level where I can like confidently play D&D or, tabletop game for a while, so I know that there's levels to the game.
Yeah. I for my brother's bachelor party earlier this year over Zoom, we played D&D. I'm just like, I have never played this game before. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I will sit down and play like Arkham for 4 hours and just yell Batman quotes at the screen as I'm like swooping down to pick up a guy. It's just too much fun. So then I started thinking about switching into doing podcasting, because when you're doing text-based interviews, it's so easy to lose people's inflections, like actually hear the heart. It's one of the problems with social media. I find it's easy to take a quote out of context, or hard to hear the heart of someone. And at the time, it was 140 characters or less on Twitter, where it's you lose context, you lose meaning. So I'm like, okay, if we can sit down and do these podcasts where we actually hear someone's heart, you can't dismiss it as much. And then also, you might hear something that can challenge you, but in that good way. Like if you're at church and you're having a conversation with a fellow believer, or the pastor shares something, it's gonna challenge you, but you can't be like, this guy's out to pick on me, or just take something.
One of the things we've seen with our church, like here, and especially we have a location that's all on a college campus. Some of the most fruitful ministry is the conversations after. Like, and it's one of the things we've suffered with here with how we're currently operating is like we had this really dope lobby space. It had a couple couches, little coffee shop-esque vibe going on, and people would literally walk out of service and sit and just like not leave. They would just sit and start talking and have conversations, or people would come early and have conversations. And then with we did no services except online for a while. And then we did parking lot through the summer, and which was fun. Like roasting asphalt all day long. And then around Labor Day, we went back in our buildings, but we went with like every chair is 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
And then we removed all of our lobby furniture. So so people couldn't sit around.
Yeah.
And like we even took away having coffee. And so we just put bottles of water on the counter so people are like, thanks.
Yeah.
But now we're trying to like integrate, like this past Sunday is the first Sunday we had coffee again. But it's one of the things is like good conversations are often more fruitful than one-sided dialogue. Which is one of the things, like, we had talked about why for whatever dumb reason I'd never had you on this podcast before. And it was the thing of like, if you look back at the track record of this podcast, like I didn't start bringing people on here until like this year.
Right.
And it wasn't because of like, man, all these other people suck. It's that like my own intimidation of like awkwardness of like asking people to come on and like thinking my time is valuable enough to bring them on for it. So it's like just something I had to overcome with that. So y'all that haven't had, you've heard Chris on, you've heard me on Chris's.
Yeah.
My bad for not having you here sooner.
It's all good, dude.
So like, what's life been like for you? What's been different for you in this season?
So in this season, like 2020 has been an interesting one. I had at the start of the year, I had a new job. I gotten in September. It was contract work, and then right before COVID happened, we found out our contracts weren't getting renewed. It was just funding going to a different stream. So that was a bit of an emotional blow. And personally, Hector, I've appreciated so much just on even our like private chats, but through Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, how much stuff you've been posting about anxiety and mental health. Because I've been in that season. I've been having, I struggle with anxiety. I have medication for it now, which is slowly helping. But that's been my season for the past couple months. I've been out of work or not necessarily able to work because of the anxiety. But through this time, Canada, for a long time, we were in lockdown for a good couple months. Like, you couldn't work. So people who were working from home, but there were limitations going on outside, and that was what that was. But what's been good about it is more so than any other time, I've been finding myself really, really appreciating connection. The anxiety had been amping up for months before all this happened. Um, but at the time, you almost take for granted the frequent easy communication you'll have with friends, just being able to see them or just being able to go somewhere. And I've really appreciated that connection and reaching out to people over the past while. Just that time to refresh, recharge, have meaningful conversations, but also just have fun talking about nothing, just sharing memes or ridiculous things and laughing at it. And I've grown to appreciate like entertainment a little bit more than before. At times it could be something you're like, I'm really struggling. I just need to unplug, so I'm going to watch Parks and Rec for like the umpteenth time. But then just those little things where you're like, wow, I can actually have this reprieve. Like I can take more time to work on my mental health and turn that over to the Lord. Be a lot more deliberate with time and deliberate with how I interact with people, because now I'm not taking it for granted. And how you do the podcast, even if it's a deep dive into the history of Power Rangers, which I did because that show is just so much fun. Just that kind of thing. But I've been able to forge other friendships with other Christian podcasters and just others around the world. And it's been a great time to be challenged and have that fun experience of being challenged, because it forces you to grow. It forces you to think about other people beyond that. I'm going to get entrenched in my own thought process. Like, okay, now I actually have the time to try to figure out where this other person is coming from. And it's been an interesting season. That's my long-winded way of getting there.
It's one of those things with, I was just talking about like my friend Rebecca that does the Retro Code podcast, the whole Zennial thing we were talking about. She's doing a whole series right now on mental health and the church and anxiety and stuff like that. And she's doing some deep cuts of stuff like with miscarriages and like, I mean, her stuff is like really, really good. And like the first, I binged listened to, she's only on like 8 podcasts so far, and they're all 20 minutes. So for long-witted heifers like me, that's like,
you just pound those out, man.
That's a snack.
You got 8 episodes. Exactly.
But she'd been doing some stuff on mental health, and like she had posted a question like, for feedback, and like the one thing that I sent to her was that I've been in full-time ministry since 99, 2000 era, like so a solid 20 years of adult full-time ministry. And
since the Phantom Menace was in theaters.
Yes. Actually, I graduated in 99 and immediately went to Orlando to work at a Bible camp. And that was the beginning of my full-time ministry career. And on weekends, we would rotate between watching like movies all day in theaters. And so like there was a weekend we watched Phantom Menace, The Haunting, and Wild Wild West. And that was our whole Saturday. And my daughter
what a Saturday.
Yeah. But we watched those 3 movies like 3 Saturdays in a row.
Oh my goodness.
And and I think Men in Black might have been in some of that too, but I don't remember. Or maybe I'm just mixing up Wild Wild West. Like my daughter recently wanted to watch a scary movie, and so like because she's getting into that age, and I was like, well, The Haunting is real, null, and not scary. Let's try that. And the Liam Neeson one from 1999, and she likes Qui-Gon, so I was like, this would be a good mix. And I'm like, oh man, Owen Wilson. But that's that thing of, I've been in full-time ministry for 20 years, and I feel like maybe the last 2 years are the first time it's ever been remotely acceptable to talk about your mental health or your
Yeah.
anxiety or your stress levels or anything like that, because before then it's just like, well, you better pray about it or you're not spiritual enough, or
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's just something like, it was a sign of weakness to be open and honest. And like, that's one of the things is there's been a lot of more transparency in terms of people being honest about what they're dealing with. And like, there's been straight up days where I hustle, I move around a lot, I do a lot of different things for a lot of different arenas. And um
Yep.
there's been days I just literally wanted to text people and be like, hey, I'm super depressed today, I don't want to do this. And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm not at the point yet where I'll actually send that text, but not to like somebody I'm working with, or like on Wednesdays we pick up a van load of fresh produce to deliver to like homeless people or to people in the area that need food. And so like I literally was like, man, I'm not emotionally stable today, but I don't think I can text that to the person with the 18 wheeler full of vegetables. But it's one of those things of like, it's become a much more
Yeah.
honest conversation. That's the thing I sent to Rebecca for her podcast. But being able to deal with that, because I can honestly say, like, as bad as 2019 is, and I know I've said this before, as bad as 2020 is, 2019 was a much worse year for me.
Right.
Emotionally, mentally, it was my best year in terms of success, but it was also the most emotionally damaging. And I ended up in some toxic friendships, and had my identities attached to the wrong things, and just, it was ugly. And I came towards the end of 2019, literally about a year ago right now. I was at the place where I felt like giving up on everything, and like scrapping faith in fandom, like everything. Just I was like, I'm gonna go live in the woods. Is where I was at. And I felt like January and February, I felt like my life was piecing back together. Like, I was like, I came out, I was like, oh man, my marriage, my family, my mental health, I was like, man, I feel like I'm fine. I'm in a good place. And then like March, and it's like, but it really
Yep.
was. It felt like I'd just gotten to a place of stability when the world fell apart. And
Yep.
but if you have to have all of your surroundings stable in order for you to be stable, you'll never be stable. And
Yeah.
so I'm working on that. On your Power Rangers deep dive, have I ever told you any of my Power Ranger stories?
No, no, sir.
Okay, well, this is one for you, and for anyone listening or watching that just wants a fun Power Ranger story, I'm going to give you two, because
Awesome.
in my recent adult life, I've worked with a lot of the Power Rangers, like
Yeah.
just with cons and stuff. And but my first Power Ranger story is like pre-con, pre whatever, like pre. This is when I was an early teenager. It was Power Rangers the end of season 1, or whenever Tommy had just officially kicked in.
He came in mid first season. Yeah, around I think it's somewhere between episode 20 and 30, and it was like the 5 episode Green with Evil saga. Yeah.
Okay, so this would have been between season 1 and 2.
Okay.
Um, they were doing mall tours,
Right.
and where they would send a couple rangers to a local mall or whatever, and have them sign autographs, do all this stuff. And this was when Power Rangers was kicking off hard, especially here in America with like teenage girls. Um,
You had Tommy, like, who was the heartthrob, and then you had Kimberly, Amy Jo, who was like almost every boy my age's like first crush.
and so I heard the Power Rangers were going to be. They weren't coming to our mall. They were coming to our local baseball game.
Ooh.
And so me and my best friend at that time got dropped off. We weren't old enough to drive, so this would have been like I was 13 or 14, and we got dropped off. We waited in line. I honestly didn't own any Power Rangers merch at that point. at that point in time, I had I'd stopped reading comic books and stuff. I'd dialed it back because I was trying to be a cool teenager, and we went to this baseball game though to meet the Power Rangers, and it was Yost and Frank. So it was
Nice.
blue and green.
Yeah.
And so went there. The only thing I had was I grabbed a popcorn box off the ground and had them both sign it because the autographs were free.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean this was season 1, so, and
Yeah.
they'd gotten paid to come, so they were at this and they signed my popcorn box. I'm like, cool, and then I literally threw it away. Like I threw Jason David Frank and Yost's autograph away because I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I threw it away.
Years later, you could have made a killing for that off of eBay.
Right, yeah, years later. But then they only stayed an hour. They were supposed to be there like 3 hours, 4 hours or something. And they only stayed an hour. And so like we got there early. We were one of the first ones in line because didn't have a life. And like I got my popcorn box signed, and then they said, all right, we're out of here. And a big old limo pulled up into this cruddy little baseball stadium. And I'm talking like, this isn't even like Major League Baseball. This is like 3 layers of minor.
Oh, wow.
So this is like minor league. And limo pulls up and they get in the back seat, and like girls are literally clawing at the limo. And Jason David Frank climbs through the roof of the limo. And he does like the Triple H thing with the water.
Yeah.
So he like pours water, goes, sprays water everywhere, and then he throws the water bottle out. And I straight watched 2 teenage girls get in a fist fight.
Oh my gosh.
Slugging to own the possession of Jason David Frank's discarded water bottle that touched his lips. And they got in a fist fight. And they drove away, and he's like pointing and laughing at the fist fight as they drove away. And that's part A. Here's part B. They left. People were still in line to get into the stadium when they left. So they still had the tables, the chairs, the roped off areas. So as the lines were going on, my best friend and I went and sat down at the tables. And there were still Sharpies. So people came up and we started signing autographs. And they're like, who are you? I was like, we're Bulk and Skull's new sidekicks for season 2. And we made up fake names, and that was our story. We were Bulk and Skull's sidekicks because I was the portly one, the other dude was super skinny, and I was like, we're counter partner. And I signed autographs with my 14-year-old best friend for a solid half hour before somebody said something to us. And but there's at least 100 people in the rural North Carolina region that have fake autographed merch from when I was 14. So I'm sure it got thrown away, but that was one of those my first Power Ranger story. And but yeah, man. So what do you have like in the works? Like what are you doing to like for your own sake of creation and productivity and stuff? Like what do you want to like work on? Like what's next for you or One Cross Radio or
So, well, earlier this year, actually, through you, I got to achieve one of my dreams of writing. Like, I've always kind of enjoyed writing, but as I said in the chapter for Faith and Fandom, through you and through Bex from Redeemed Otaku, which, if any of your listeners aren't familiar with that show, it's a podcast looking at anime through a Christian worldview. Like, just being able to see, even not necessarily where the creators intended, like, God honoring biblical lessons has been great. So that was a terrific experience, and it opened my mind more to doing that. So I've got a couple things low key in the works now as the mental health, unfortunately, the anxiety's amped up. Like, I've had to put that a little bit on the back burner. I've been reducing the podcast schedule just because, and I think like you'll understand this, Hector. Like when that stuff is flaring up, depression and anxiety, it will impact the stuff that normally brings you energy and joy. And there's sometimes stuff where you'll start to just let it slide, where you're like, oh, okay, I'm borderline phoning it in, or I'm not putting my best energy into it. My joke would be like, or my self-deprecating joke is, God created so much wonderful artistry and beautiful things, and through music, through everything. And right now, I'm like at times I'd feel like I'm doing the equivalent of just slapping Jesus in front of the Lifesavers logo, where I'm like that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be tacky. So. Right now I'm slowing down just to reschedule, reshuffle, and reprioritize. Some of the stuff I'm doing is even just fun, nerdy stuff where it's the challenge of looking at things. I've started a new sub-series on the podcast called Unmade. We just did our first episode of that, where it was myself and a friend of mine, Mike, looking at unmade Batman movies.
I thought that was a really interesting concept.
Yeah, it's kind of the fun thing of with Batman. There's so many. I'm actually recording an episode later tonight with my buddy Pastor Steve. We're looking at some of the unmade Spider-Man movies, and it's just the fun of learning why didn't these get made? At what point did they not get made? But then also trying to see as a fan, like, okay, is there some stuff I can separate from? Where it's like, it wasn't this, so I'm upset, and be like, is there some aspects I could enjoy? Part of that came out of learning what was Zack Snyder's original vision for Justice League. I'm on the record for not enjoying Batman Superman, and what came as Justice League is not my bag. But when the stuff started leaking about what his original intention was, it's kind of like, okay, this isn't like comic book Justice League that I've wanted to see on the big screen. But some of this stuff kind of color me interested. I'd be curious about it. Or the well-known Kevin Smith story about Superman Lives. There was an excellent documentary, The Death of Superman Lives, where you went in deeper to it and you saw like Nick Cage in the suit that wasn't just the terribly lit photograph that circles on the internet. And you're like, you know what? I'm kind of curious about it. Like, I'd be curious to see it in an animated form, just that kind of thing. So that's a fun progress and a fun challenge with Spider-Man, the one I'm recording tonight. Like, I know we're going to talk about what would have been Sam Raimi's fourth Spider-Man movie. I'm on the record as not enjoying any of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And I know a lot of people in the nerd community will be like, you don't like Spider-Man 2? Your card is revoked. But the challenge for me is like, okay, can I try to look at this as unbiasedly as possible and be like, oh, that kind of would have been a cool idea. With Batman, it was the Joel Schumacher one. What his third movie might have been. And I'm kind of interested in it. There was some stuff that's just like pure 90s. Like, if it was going to involve Harley Quinn, she would have been the Joker's daughter, which is just such 90 comic book movies logic. But I'm still like, that's interesting, because it was going to potentially involve Scarecrow and the Fear Gas and him hallucinating Jack Nicholson's Joker returning. And that kind of thing where I'm like, that's not the Batman, because you want comic book Batman on the big screen, but I'm still like, that's an interesting version. That could be a cool story. So I'm trying not to oversink my teeth into this concept where I'll just record, and then be like, I'm done. I'm burned out on it already. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to explore other stories and all that. And I find if I get excited about that, sometimes through that or recording an episode, it can make me want to write, which I I can't say what one, but I am involved in working on another devotional. Um, working, yeah, it's well, I they haven't told me whether or not I can say, so I'm not. Just out of respect, like beforehand for a while, like when I was after I sent the chapter to you, I wasn't sure if I could say. So I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna tell like one or two people who I know don't say anything, but then others they're like, hey, you've said you're busy lately. What are you doing? I'm like, I literally can't say because I don't know if I can. And then eventually it's on my horizons. It's a little bit on the back burner right now, but I am trying to write my own devotional. It's like I messaged you about it earlier this year, and I also wanted to get your blessing, just because I'm like, this is borderline wholesale, like taking the concept of what you do, but there's a lot of inspiration there, and finding God's truth and biblical principles and applications and examples, but just in everyday things in everyday media where it's not necessarily intended. I enjoy that, where we already learn from other media, whether we like to agree with that or not. Like we absorb it in some way. We remember the quotes. We do learn. So trying to being able to find the Lord in that is a wonderful thing. So I'm really excited to eventually get back to that as well. But it's interesting because I've never done this before. So as I get further along in that process, I'm going to be picking your brain, sir.
Well, and that's one of the things is like that whole "there's nothing new under the sun." The more likely the stuff that we come up with, like that we think is our own, whenever we feel like upset or how dare someone else do something I'm doing, but dude, we have to let that go because I've felt that before. But in reality is more than likely there's someone that has our same perspective. We just don't know them.
Right.
And there's people that have the same calling and inspiration. They're just not in our bubble. And that's one of the things, with stuff like Love Thy Nerd and other communities, Geeks Under Grace and stuff like that have kind of like linked us all together. Every person I've met that does geeky ministry didn't know other people were doing it when they started.
Right.
Or they saw somebody else and they may have gotten a direct inspiration, but a lot of the folks that did it, they thought they were the only ones doing it. And we're not. And and the reality is we all have individual bubbles that people will interact with and touch that other people won't touch. Like you and I could literally publish the same thing and different audiences are going to read it.
Right.
It's like one of those things with the TikTok algorithm, people literally will post the same. If you have 5 people post the same video, exact same video, one of those videos will be successful, 4 of them won't.
Right.
Or they'll reach certain people. And that's the big deal is that you got to be honest between you and your creator. Like if he's giving you something to say it. I'm gonna look this verse up because I told somebody else this verse and didn't look it up the other day, and I needed to tell them to. It's like one of my I'm having this exact conversation with one of our church folks right now, but that feels led to write a book. But should I bother? Would anyone care? Stuff like I'm like, look, dude, that's not the point. The point is, if God gives it to you, put it out.
Yeah.
Hold on, this won't take a second. But it's Jeremiah 30 verse 2. This is what the Lord God of Israel says: write in the book all the words which I have given to you. And I had a journal when I was 16, and I had that in tape across my journal. And
nice.
My youth leader had told me that when I was a kid, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna roll with that. So it's the big thing is sharing your voice, because if God gives it to you, do it. And the biggest thing I've always encouraged other people is if your gauge of success is how people respond, you'll never be successful enough. If your gauge of success is, I had this in me, I needed to create it, and I created it, you're successful. And it's just, that's one of the things that's really easy to gauge, like how people do it, how many likes things get, how many copies get sold. Because that's one of the reasons I didn't want to publish book 7 now is because I knew that the world's how it is, and it's just like, you know, it's not going to have the same response, because my online sales and people buying stuff, it's there, but it's not there like con there. Like I'll sell more copies of a book in one weekend in a con than a year online.
Wow.
Yeah. And then like, or you can't control like what sells online, because like, you know, I published book 7 in June or July, and like
I'm just remembering that I had ordered it and it came, and I got my copies before you did.
And I got it, or like I was watching sales, because, you know, I quietly do all that and like without like flipping out too much, and I was getting angry. People were buying book 1 instead of book 7. I'm like, stop it! Don't buy that one. Buy this one. And like, full disclosure, during like the June to October window, sold 3 times as many copies of book 1 as book 7. And I'm like, well, screw you guys. I'm not making new books. I'm like, oh no. And I'm also in the season of like where now, like right now, like if I was going based on my normal calendar, would be when I would double down to start writing the next book.
Right.
And I'm like, but I haven't even like put the other book out there. And I'm like, I'm debating what to do, but we also have those kids books in the works, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you're writing some other stuff as well. Like,
well, that's the thing. I wrote those in a 2-day window.
Oh, wow.
Like, kids' books barely have any text. So I wrote the kids' books like in 2 days, but Vincent has like 70 pages of full color art to do.
Wow.
And I got to say that honestly, like some of the stuff I've seen on it is some of the best stuff he's done. And then he hit me up the other day. We were talking. He's like, I might throw away everything I've done on book 1 and start over. I'm like, don't do that. But I mean, do what you got to do. But it's hard with a creative process and the world not looking. But like that's the biggest thing, man. It's just like, don't feel pressured to create when you don't feel it.
Right.
Be faithful with what you're given. So if you know there's something in you that you need to, like I was telling you, like I don't want to share what I'm going to share in the next like just a millisecond one. Like I don't know. I want to share that, but like it's in there. So I feel like if I don't, I'm not being faithful with that. So I'm going to give it a shot until like I get lynched out of town. But that's like the thing, you know, like one of my mentors, and the dude was legitimately like my father figure. And I don't mean any ill will in saying this, but he was the guy that was the camp director of the camp I worked at for like 15 years. And he was like the most honest to goodness father figure I ever had. And back pre-social media, but still internet, like when people were having blogs and blog spots and before Facebook, but after AIM, like
right.
in that
the MySpace era.
Pre-MySpace.
Oh, okay.
This was pre-MySpace, and or maybe MySpace existed, but like either way, it was somewhere in there. I had a blog, and I would just like straight flesh out my feelings, like on stuff, and like I remember specifically, I wrote. I don't remember what the name of my blog was, but I know the background was purple. But I wrote this blog on Hootie and the Blowfish's song "Time," and how discouraged I was with people not being there for me when I needed them, like people that didn't show up to my wedding and stuff like that. And
Right.
I fleshed some feelings out, and like I got called into the office of our camp. He's like, "Why do you have to share what you feel on the internet?" And like, here's the thing: like, the internet was a brand new thing to him, and I fully get that.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I think I'm supposed to do that." He's like, "It's embarrassing." And then like he apologized because he was one of those people that like had base. I didn't call him out, but he was one of the people discussed in that blog.
Right.
And so he like in tears apologized for it and everything, but like it was that idea of like, why do you have to share what you feel? And one of the things I've come to realize is sometimes we don't even acknowledge what we're feeling until we're sharing it.
Yeah.
Like if we have healthy habits of like journaling and self-discovery and meditation and prayer and things like that, if we have that, sometimes we don't have to share it. But the reality is most of us don't practice those disciplines to the point where we're honest enough with ourselves unless we have to be honest with other people.
Right.
And because like I could journal, but it's a lot more practical that if I'm sharing it with somebody else, I'm going to share it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just a. So you're doing a Spider-Man episode of Unmade tonight.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I've got to do a little bit of research into it because I didn't even know about it. When I had looked up some of the articles about unmade Spider-Man movies, this one wasn't there, but apparently one was pitched back during when it was the Amazing Spider-Man of an Aunt May movie. Just an Aunt May movie. What? Yeah, yeah, Sally Fields. Just not old woman Rose Aunt May from the Sam Raimi movies, but
And I would take a Marissa Tomei like Aunt May movie.
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, you've got the rom com with her and Happy, like that makes sense now. But the the Sally Fields one, it's I think it was. Oh no, it was the. There's the collection of the old Peter David Spider-Man 2099 comics coming out, and I've been collecting those, and I think it's the third or fourth one where it has like other in one of the letter to the editor sections. It's 2099 characters we will never see, and one of them was Aunt May 2099. I can't remember what the idea was behind it, but that just stuck out to me. So as soon as Steve sent me that, I'm like, oh, please tell me it's 2099 somehow, and it's just this really, really old version of Aunt May, just like making tea or something. Just nothing to it. Just you could do that as a one-off streaming episode, but a movie?
No, that's well, I think they're going to explore a lot of that with the upcoming like Marvel What If.
Yeah. That's one of the Marvel things I'm most excited for. And they've announced, I think it's official now. If it's not official, it's been like, hey, we're in talks with him. But Oscar Isaac for Moon Knight. And that's awesome.
I saw a thing it was cast, but then one of the things that I was hearing debated is that was it live action or animated.
I'm honestly down for either. And the thing is, like, it's going to sound like a slight against Star Wars, and I guess it kind of is, but I'm not trying for it to be. But if anybody knows Moon Knight, and I know Chris Poirier, he's mentioned it on the pull list several times. Like he's a Moon Knight fan. Oscar Isaac's going to be great for that, and he's going to have the chance to show off his range more than he got to do with Star Wars, but especially more than he got to do with Apocalypse. So it's like it's this redemption. I think he's got the shot at redemption for comic book movies, and we all like that. We all like the redemption stories. Like Ben Affleck had that with Batfleck that after Daredevil. Even though Batman Superman was what it was, I can't pin it on him. So I'm excited for Moon Knight, man, and he might work better for animated than live action. Just like him doing a streaming series works much better than him in film, just because there's so much to that character that I'm like, you can't truncate that into a 2 hour movie.
I didn't love him as Gomez in the animated Adams Family.
Oh, that's fair.
Like, so if that's what I've got to look forward to, I'll pass. But like, honestly, when I saw the Moon Knight thing, the one thing I pictured was the phone or the conversation at the beginning of episode 8, holding for General Hux, like that whole thing. And I'm like, if you give me that as Moon Knight, I'll take it. Okay. Still holding, like, because that cracked me up.
I didn't like that, but that's not something I could pin on the actors. I'm just like, that's modern humor that has never been in Star Wars. It's just one of those things where I'm like, I also just hate The Last Jedi. I don't like it.
I'm one of those that I'm either neutral to love it. So like, I'm
fair.
But like, I think I appreciate it because there was more humor that like caught you off guard. Like the thing with throwing the lightsaber. I know that was a cheap shtick, but like, it like from where we left off at episode 7, it's not what I expected to happen. And so
right.
So that the General Hux thing, the Yoda saying page turners, were they? Like, I mean, like, okay, like I felt like he was having fun with it. But you know, that's that.
Especially after Knives Out, I'd be much more. I'm much more interested in Rian Johnson's take on Star Wars if he's building it from the ground up. Like, because his whole shtick is subverting expectation, and Knives Out did that. Knives Out was excellent, but the issue I have with The Last Jedi is I'm like, this is the middle of a trilogy, and we're dumping everything from the first movie, and the first movie was a rehash, and then the third movie's like, all right, we got to retcon stuff, and the trilogy had issues, but I'm like, if you're building it from the ground up and you're not throwing stuff out, color me very, very interested.
I put all of that on Abrams because if he would have just stuck with it and committed, none of this would be an issue. We'd either have a consistent story or we wouldn't.
Right. Well, apparently, like, you say apparently because I'm not in the room. It's all, like, all these reports are second or third hand or whatever, they're leaked. But some of the stuff was, when Johnson was coming on, there was the direct continuation, but then it was Kennedy and the board were liking his approach so much that they're like, hey, you know what? You do what you want. Where might not be the time, but also, again, I can't say that with any certainty because I'm not in the room. Like, you're just going by what people are talking about.
But I'm just saying, if Abrams would have been there for all three, it would have been. It may not have been the same story, but it would have been a consistent story. But like, that puts that thing of like, you left and now you came back, and so you can't really complain about whatever else, and everybody's got a finger to point. And I'm like,
yeah. Whereas we'll point at The Mandalorian and especially the Clone Wars as, this is awesome. Like, get me those teams just on the big screen front as well.
I've come to the point realized that lately I can't talk about Mandalorian with people in my community because then it turns into a conversation. But do you know about Clone Wars? And and then I will literally twice this week I spelled out the entire plot line of Rebels and Clone Wars to people to explain to them everything they're missing with Mandalorian and why they need to go back and watch like 10 seasons of television so they know what's going on. And like, and I'm like, but this episode and this and this and this, like I was talking about that with Vincent, and then because he just watched Mandalorian season 1 like last week, And then um, and then I was talking to a dude at the local comic book shop because he asked me because he's not seen him, and he's like, "So what's the deal with Ahsoka?" And I'm like, "Bruh," because that's what I was cool to see Bo. Stop talking.
Boba?
I was like, I don't know where we're at with spoilers.
Oh, so is this for season 2? So I haven't watched the first episode yet, but basically it's because I learned through um, the documentary The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls one, and it was coming out at the same time as the Clone Wars. I'm not built for one episode at a time anymore, so I'm waiting till I've got like 2 or 3 that I can binge in a row. I can't do one-offs because then I'm just like, oh, that sucks. Give me another one now. But I've heard a lot of the leaks beforehand. Ahsoka's coming in this season. You like Boba Fett's coming back. They announced that a while ago, and I'm fine with knowing that because there was a couple hints to it anyway. And it's also like you'd be crazy not to bring this character back because he was your EA cash cow.
Well, that's the thing of like they're going to bring these people back. My kids are more excited for Sabine and Ahsoka, but
Right.
there's going to be a whole bulk of Mandalorian audience that has no idea who this is.
Yeah. What I really appreciated about The Mandalorian um, is, in a way, how accessible and isolated it is. There is the stuff where it's like a lot of deep cut references that you'll appreciate more if you've watched Star Wars or Clone Wars or Rebels, like the Darksaber and this character or that character or this setting. But then there's other times where I'm like, you know what? It doesn't. They're not making it like integral to it, where you don't need to have known it. If you know it, you'll appreciate it more. I think in the pilot episode of it, there's 2 references to the Star Wars Christmas special. Not many people have seen that, and if you have, just don't watch it again. It is what it is. But doing it in a way where I'm just like, they did it. They did a reference, but it worked, and it wasn't like they just had it and moved on. I'm like, that's how you do it. I really appreciated that, where if you know it, you're going to appreciate it, but it's not going to stand out in a way where you're going to be like, oh, wait, what's going on? I don't know this. You don't have to have that pre-knowledge going in. You don't have to do homework.
I didn't know. I hadn't watched Clone Wars or Rebels when I watched season 1, so
Right.
the Darksaber didn't mean much to me. Then watching that, I'm like, so like we actually have a toy Darksaber at our house now, and that's
Oh,
like,
nice.
that's at Target, yo. It's like $20.
We don't have Target up here. It came up and then it left. and we had it never worked. It never worked up here because Canadian deals are different than American deals, and it had to be a certain amount of products and all that. It's the differences you get from like Netflix Canada to Netflix American. Just Target didn't fly in Canada, which sucks. I miss that store.
Well, they one of the things that's not a crazy spoiler, but just like one of those things of like you appreciate it if you have more knowledge. The R5 unit from episode 4, like the Uncle Owen, this R5's got a busted kebab.
Yeah.
That exact droid is there.
Hey!
And but people that I mean, literally 90% of the world that watched it, it's not going to know. But like you literally see the part that blew up when Luke was talking, welded shut.
Nice.
And there's going to be a spot where you actually see one of Anakin's old pod engines.
Nice.
Now, most of the world not going to notice. I didn't notice one of those things that with the Mandalorian that rescued the actual Mandalorian, Jin is his name, right? The Mandalorian that rescued Jin in season 1, like picked him up, flew away with him. He had a Death Watch logo.
I missed that.
I missed that. I found that out this week. Somebody like went back and paused the screen, and clear as day,
Yeah.
right here, the Death Watch symbol is on his armor.
I gotta go back for that. I gotta
So
find that.
it's that episode where the dude picks up Jen and flies away. He has the Death Watch logo right there. Didn't mean a world to me a year ago, but now we're dealing with that. So that's a different story.
Well, that's like in Thor Ragnarok. You got like the tower where Hulk is staying and Thor is being kept. On the side, you got the head of the Corbinite, which for deep comic book fans, you're like, Beta Ray Bill. It's not Beta Ray Bill, but it's his species. But for everybody else, they're like, wait, why are you getting so excited?
Well, and for the comic fans, that Beta Ray Bill was supposed to be the person in that story, not Thor. So
yeah.
It is what it is. So let me ask you this, since you mentioned your Canadianness.
Yes.
How are y'all looking at us right now? Like, as you as an individual, as a country altogether, how does Canada? What's the vibe with Canada looking at America for 2020 and like right now?
It's interesting. I'm gonna say it depends on the circle. It really does. Something that has concerned me with the state of American politics has been coming up here, where it's the entrenchment in camps, right? Where it's you're a Dem and that's what you are. You're a Republican and that's what you are. And there seems to be no middle ground, and we're going to stand by the party no matter who's running it. And that's definitely coming up here. And even though when you look at the political spectrum, like even the conservatives in Canada, which is now called the Progressive Conservative Party, we're all on the left.
Just on a linguistics term, that sounds kind of like oxymoronical.
Well, it's because it was the merger of two right-winged parties. So then they're like, and anytime anybody tries to say like, oh, that's a Christian vote, it's like, no, it's not. They are fiscally conservative. There is a Christian Party of Canada, and if you're wanting to be technical about the vote, that's who it would go to. But it really depends on the circles. There's a lot of people who it's that thing where it's like if it's left, it's bad, so it's the automatic siding. But then there's a lot of people who Canada in our politics, we really don't like. We have two main parties, but we have other parties on the platform that have seats. So for me, because I've voted for 4 different parties, when I see that stuff down in the States, I'm just like, why? How is the other parties not getting more votes right now? And it just seems to be that 2-party system. So that's infuriating to us up here. But then others are like, how is it this close? You've got people who are on the conservative side in Canada being like, I can't believe it's this close. And the Biden in that side is getting that. And then there's others being like, how is it even this close on the Republican side? And then a bunch of us are just like, how have things gotten to where they are? But it's a reflection, to me, what's going on down with you guys is a reflection of a lot of us across the world. Like America, especially online in other countries, we like to pretend like, oh, we're so much more above that. Like America's got their patriotism, like we're number one and we're ready to be like, yeah, we've got free healthcare, yeah, we've got this, yeah, we've got that. We've all got our own crap and we don't like being reminded of it. So we pick on you guys a lot, but and I'm not saying that to be mean, but it's just like but 2020 I think has been in numerous ways a great time for learning. Whether or not you agree with how things debatably extreme things have gotten with the protesting, there are things that have been ignored or not addressed for a long time. And 2020 has been bringing those to the forefront, and that's challenging. And it's easy to look at the States and be like, how can you not do that? But in Canada, it's become very aware, like, we've been doing similar things. In the UK, it's that as well. We're getting so many good challenges here that I'm hoping it goes well. the light answer is we're looking at y'all being like, how is it taking so long? Like, how is it this close? But then to me, it's also like, this is a symptom of so many things for so long. That's a long-winded answer, and I went on many tangents.
Well, I'm just curious because, like, I've made a lot of British friends on TikTok over the last couple months, and just learning things. And like, we're dealing with election, and they're dealing with another lockdown. And
Yeah.
I've got a friend that straight up does impersonations of Boris from the PM, and like, I'm like, I didn't know this was happening, and legitimately, based on our news coverage. If it wasn't for TikTok, I wouldn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. It's just like, I know how it looks here. And and that's, I think Relevant Magazine or somebody recently put out just a thing of like, it's okay if you feel like you're like societal pilgrim right now. Like you don't see home anywhere you look. Or you don't belong in any of this. It's just because that's one of the things, like, I'm looking at both sides of all this. I'm like, y'all are bananas. And trying to figure out, that's the thing, like, just even within my church, dude, like, there are people that are hardcore A and hardcore B.
Well, I was going to say, like, seeing online before, it's been so interesting to me as the votes have been coming in. Like, I'm following it just because I'm interested. And seeing how tight it was, I didn't see that coming. Just because it seems so much of like it was either going to be hardcore A or hardcore B. And you're like, wow, it's gotten like really, really tight. But it seems the extremes. Like the popular picture is, of course, and he gives plenty of ammunition through Twitter, like to paint the sitting president in as negative a light as possible. So it's almost like the rest of the world is looking at, like, in Canada, it's easy for us to be like, come on, man. But then it goes beyond that, right? Like, so much of our media now and everybody, it's either hardcore A or hardcore B, where we're not willing to engage in the positives that the opposite side is doing, or recognize the negatives with our own side. Why are things so battle line, dude?
So today, like, when we're recording this, is November 5th. And like it's, V for Vendetta Day, but I didn't realize until last night, because I watched it last night with my 12-year-old, because just like letting her watch new things, that V for Vendetta actually takes place on November 5th, 2020. Like, it's
boy,
legitimately right now.
Yeah.
And the fact that the plot line is that a virus mishandled by the government killed America, and along with other stuff, and that the UK offered security but not freedom. And it's just like, stop. That's like, okay, guys, quit it. My daughter's like, how is this written like 30 years ago and actually looks like my life? I'm like,
yep. Somewhere Hugo Weaving is getting ready to go out and mess with some people today.
Well, that's the thing. I done some stuff in a Guy Fawkes Max just last night for goofing around, just because I saw one on clearance and I'm like, oh, I should get this. But just before we get out of here, man, like, is there anything you want to share? Anything on your heart? Anything you want to leave people? If people never hear from you again, like for the rest of eternity, like what's the one thing you want to leave them with?
Okay. My immediate joke answer is watch Clone Wars Season 7. It's the best thing out of Star Wars.
I like 5. I think I like Season 5, but I'm with you.
Fair.
The whole mechanic sisters thing with the spice, I could leave that out.
You know
I
what?
felt
That's
like
fair.
filler.
to me, it was good filler in the sense of it served a purpose of getting Ahsoka to where she needed to be juxtaposed against Anakin and Obi-Wan in those final 4 episodes. But on the serious front, it's been something. 2020 has been the year that I've like, even for myself, like as much as I love to think that I can be a peacemaker and I'll be even-handed in my comments and in my judgments. I've been reminded repeatedly how much, one, I need God's grace and patience for myself, but also how much I need to show it to others. And this year, because it's been so challenging, personally with the mental health flare-ups, and then also losing that job, and then you're not necessarily able to see family as much, and all this, and then the big societal stuff going on, plus an election. If I can leave anything with anybody, it's just that reminder of God is in control. We're not going to understand everything that's going on. And we're not necessarily meant to, but we can trust that we can just remind ourselves and trust and see throughout Scripture that He is in control. And also pray for one another. We have been given a grace and a forgiveness and a love freely that we could never earn and never deserve. And we do a disservice to the Lord, and I'd say ourselves, if we don't offer that to others in turn. We can speak lovingly and firmly and stand up for our beliefs, our rights, and our freedoms, and whatever we want to insert here. But we're often doing it wrong. We need to check ourselves before we legit either wreck ourselves or wreck our testimony in attempting to wreck something else. Pray for that peace and pray for one another. Like that, to me, that's the biggest takeaway I can offer. Enjoy entertainment, yes. Enjoy self-care, but we need to care for one another as well. Be there for one another. There we go. I was trying to figure out a community quote to throw at it, just because it's kind of fun. I've been going through Community again recently, where I think it was the joke, the greatest repair man will repair man. So it's just kind of like, just be there. Be there. Pray for people you disagree with. Pray for yourself. Pray for others. Don't just pray for your loved ones. And don't pray for the heaping coals on their head. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Yes. And
Awesome.
If people want to check out any of the stuff you've created, worked on, done, what would be like the top 3 things you've made that you want people to look at? Like which episodes, which like what are your top 3, like I'm pitching to, like look at how good I can do. Like not to, well, I had that recently. I'm gonna leave their name out just in case I sound salty, but a major organization that does similar things to Faith and Fandom wanted a pitch of what I do. And so I sorted through all the books and I picked my 3 favorite chapters and sent it to them and just got left on red. And I'm like, okay. Cool, good talk. But like, what are your top 3? Like, what are your recommendations? If people are going to scour through your podcasts or go back to your YouTube videos, anything, what are the 3 things they should check out of yours to get the best picture of you?
Ooh, oh man. Wow, that's a tough one, because I've never been asked this direct question, but if someone's like, if they ask what specific episodes they should check out, most of the time I already know the person, so I might know what their inclination is, like what they're a fan of. I'm like, well, hey, check out this episode, or that kind of thing. Okay, one I'll go with is an Ask a Pastor episode I did with my father-in-law, Pastor Tom Lamshed. It's a series that I haven't been able to visit as often as I'd like. The last episode was over a year ago, but it's that kind of thing where it's like, hey, let's kind of talk about some heavier questions, but it's also accessible because like how many different denominations are there and how many different viewpoints are you going to get about a particular topic. So that one, another one would probably be, you know what? Maybe my deep dive on Power Rangers. That one was the first deep dive I did, and it's interesting just because with deep dives, they're different. Most of the time when I do a deep dive, it's like, here's the entire series, so it's not like a huge deep dive, but I'm going to cover like a 20 plus year series as much as I can. Whereas something like, say, Monster Island Film Vault, their deep dive would be, I'm going to break down every single movie or whatever within that series. So it kind of gives that flavor, and it can whet your appetite to, if you want to learn more, check out some others. And then for another one, just the personal fun of it, I'd say the Star Wars episode I did looking at Rise of Skywalker. I dropped it on New Year's. It was myself and my wife, and it's the first and only time my wife has been on my podcast. So that was an achievement that she actually felt comfortable enough to do it. And then the fun as well of doing it with Pastor Steve and his wife Becky, because it also captures the jovial side that you get with this stuff. And there's a lot of laughs. And I'll throw in a fourth one. It is a caveat. I'd say any of the episodes I've done with you, sir. The first one was, like, for me, it's also fun because I totally fanboyed like the first time we did this, because you were like one of the direct inspirations in moving to the podcast side. But then also those episodes for me as well helped me figure out how I can ask questions and where it's accessible and fun and that kind of thing. And that's where I'm like, you know what, I can get out of my shell. They've not only for me were they fun and great and have led to like an actual friendship that I enjoy, and in ways of mentorship that I've appreciated. There are also some of the ones where I'm like, hey, you know what, they're good stuff, and you don't like, you and I don't always agree, but we never go at each other either. So it's like, hey, there's this fun aspect to them. So there's 4 to 8 instead of 3.
Okay. All right. And if people are want to look you up, where should they go to find you?
So you can find the podcast in most podcatchers if you search for One Cross Radio. Our main website for that is onecrossradio.podbean.com. They're our hosts. They're the one that we do primarily with. So if you're wanting the episode as it drops, like before it takes the time to filter out, you can find it there. We also have a website, onecrossradio.podcast. Oh, sorry, not .podcast. Oh my gosh. onecrossradiopodcast.com. I'm a professional. I have these things memorized. And if you search One Cross Radio on YouTube, the channel will show up. We're in that interesting stage where we can't rename the channel yet, so it's still the same name that I've had since like I joined YouTube in 2005. Eventually, when you get like 100 followers on YouTube, then they're like, hey, you can change the name. So I'm working on that. I think I'm just like 11 or somewhere between 11 and
we had to do that with our church
short.
This summer because we were trying to broadcast our services. We're like, literally, we walked up. Everybody pull out your phone, subscribe so we can fix his name. Go.
It's almost like when you leave college and you're applying for a job and they're like, what's your email? Oh, I need something that's not my embarrassing like middle school email that I've been using this whole time. You just need that professional one now. But the website has all the links to it and everything. We're also on Twitter. If you search 2099 OCR, you'll find us. Same with Instagram. It's the same handle. And that's just because I really, really like the Marvel 2099 universe. Because except for Ravage, it was a lot of fun. Ravage was just really, really weird.
All right. Well, if you'll, man, thanks. I just want to say thanks for being here, hanging out, and sorry, I know it was like a delay getting started, but it was really good talking to you, man.
Oh, dude, I'll be honest. I had like earlier this morning, I had a mini anxiety attack. So the delay was good, but it also had us, it gave us a chance to just chat. And I love doing that with you. You're a lot of fun to talk to. And it's disarming and it gets you in that zone where you're just like, I'm fun. This is fun. This isn't work. this is hanging out and we're recording it.
Well, and that's good stuff to have. Well,
Absolutely.
dude, thank you so much. And
Thank you,
guys. I highly recommend checking out Chris's channel and all the stuff that he does because they're great heart and perspective. So thanks again for being with us here today, dude. And
Thank you, man.
Real quick before we get out of here on the podcast, I want to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters, which Chris is one of them, but also Jeanette Skaggs, Chris Poirier, Jason Bullock, Christina Ray, Rebecca Godlove, Adam Davis, Stephanie Schwann, Sarah Lewis, and Corey Grant that are currently supporting us in Patreon and other fashions. Thank you for helping just keep Faith and Fandom funded and going. And for anyone that wants to be a part of that, you're welcome to check out patreon.com/Faith and Fandom. And for more information, since this is going to be on YouTube as well as our podcast and Facebook, our Facebook is facebook.com/Faith and Fandom, all spelled out. YouTube channel's the same, and all the things. That's where it's at. But thank you so much for being a part of today, and we hope you have a great day.
God bless people.